Good evening. Tonight we talk about Mike, the mitochondria. The toy says the powerhouse of the cell. He does a lot more than that, but we're going to mostly focus on the energy production that Mike makes. So mitochondria, what are they? So they're organelles in your cells that were usurped many eons ago. They used to be bacteria, and that there's a symbiosis where they combined. We deleted, our former ancestors deleted the DNA, a lot of DNA from the mitochondria, and made a kind of a deal with them. The mitochondria made energy for the cells took care of the mitochondria, protecting it and replicating what it needed. So the mitochondria is, basically genome got cut down to 13 genes, and most of it is to make energy for you. So what do the mitochondria do? Well, they take electrons and protons and they make four main things. They're going to make ATP currency. It's one of the energy sources that your body uses. It's going to make water. It's deuterium depleted water, which gets structured or exclusion zoned water. It's going to make carbon dioxide that you breathe out. You're basically reversing photosynthesis. It's also going to make heat in the form of infrared heat. And when that heat is generated, something called the respiratory proteins, they're going to shrink down. So we're going to go through all of that tonight. So the mitochondria, you have millions of them in your body. Actually, I heard a fun fact the other day that approximately 10% of your body weight are mitochondria. In the world that I deal in cardiology, approximately 1/3 of the mass of your heart are mitochondria. Your heart is very energetically requiring organ. So your heart and brain are the two main organs that have a lot of mitochondria. The heart has somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000, maybe even more, mitochondria per every cell. The fun fact is, if anybody wants to raise their hand or put in the comments what the number one organ is that has mitochondria, I'll tell you guys that at the end of this. You'll probably be maybe surprised, but it's always a fun fact if you're a nerdy mitochondria like myself. So the mitochondria, got 5,000 in your heart cells, let's say. If the mitochondria don't work well, don't make enough energy for you, the heart starts to fail. It can fail one of two ways. The heart won't squeeze well, and you have what's known as a cardiomyopathy, where you have a systolic heart failure, where the heart doesn't pump well. But a more common form of heart failure is diastolic heart failure, which is when the heart relaxes. So it actually costs more energy for the heart to relax and fill with blood than it does to squeeze the blood out. And for the quantum nerds watching, yes, the heart is more than just a pump. It's a vortex. It is it has a twisting mechanism, which is basically accelerating the red blood cells, which are negatively charged, and it's like a maglev train accelerating through the heart. So it is more than just a pump. Actually reading a book now, The Cosmic Heart, and I'll get my book review on it later. But back to the mitochondria, there's 5 respiratory proteins inside the mitochondria. Think of them as like stepping stones in a creek, or kind of your fingers here. So when you eat food, it gets broken down into electrons and protons. So it's not that fats or carbohydrates or proteins directly go into the mitochondria. They have to get broken down into their subatomic particles. So the name of the game is collecting more electrons than you are losing back to your environment. It's kind of like Pac-Man. So Mike here gets some electrons from food, from earth and grounding, from sunlight striking the water that's in your cells, and start separating it into exclusion zone water. You get a bunch of electrons. Now they got to get funneled through Mike. So you have the 5 respiratory proteins. So they come into the first step. The electrons have to tunnel, get to the second step. Go to the third step, the fourth step, and at the fourth step, it's cytochrome C oxidase. Those electrons will combine with oxygen. This is what's known as cellular respiration. This is the main reason why you're breathing oxygen while you guys are watching me tonight, is so that this process happens inside the mitochondria. And then the mitochondria will reduce reduce oxygen into water and carbon dioxide. So the acronym that I remember is OIL-RIG. Oxidation is losing an electron. Reduction is gaining on an electron. So the oxygen at cytochrome C oxidase gains the electron as they're passed down there, and it becomes water and carbon dioxide that then you ultimately breathe off. The electrons then pass on to step 5, which is known as the ATPase. It's like a big top, and protons are pumped down through it. And it's kind of like a gate that you walk through, subway turnstile. And the faster that thing spins, the more ATP is put together and comes out the other side. So if the mitochondria don't pass electrons effectively, you can't make that ATP at the end. And I said earlier, the mitochondria make many things, but the four top ones, they're making ATP currency, they're making water, carbon dioxide, and heat. Well, what happens if those little respiratory proteins are really stretched out? Well, the electrons don't tunnel well. They don't make it over there, and they kind of leak out. When an electron leaks out, it's going to be metabolically active, and you're going to get reactive oxygen species, so a free radical. So there are certain free radicals that the body is always going to be making. As you're consuming food, it's normal to be making some amount of reactive oxygen species. It's a signaling molecule to the rest of the cells. But if you have excessive, well, right outside of the mitochondria is the DNA for the cell. That DNA then gets oxidized or rusted. It becomes damaged. Your body then has to expend energy to repair the damage. Otherwise, if you don't repair the damage, the cell's going to die or become a cancer cell. So you want to have those respiratory proteins really close together so that the energy goes through effectively. For those that see me in the office, this is one of the reasons I ask you the question. If you've done 23andMe or ancestry reports and you have your maternal haplotype on there, you're going to know what type of mitochondria that you were kind of born with. You only get your mitochondria from your mom, and this is work done by Doug Wallace out of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So people who have a kind of L haplotype, they got respiratory proteins when they're born that are really close together. You have a northern latitude haplotype, those respiratory proteins are kind of spread apart to begin with. Why would Mother Nature do that? Well, when you moved off the equator and got really north, it's really cold up there. You don't want to freeze to death. So some of that energy is dissipated as heat. But once the heat gets dissipated, the respiratory proteins can come back together a little bit and then can pass the electrons through the little channel. So again, it's kind of like, Frogger or whatever, you're jumping through the little stones. You don't want to lose the electrons, because otherwise you can't make the products at the end that your body needs. Carbon dioxide, water, ATP, and heat. So talked about what the mitochondria do with that. Well, on the other side, the ATP is used to kind of help fold different proteins together. The water that you make, which is deuterium depleted water, is really good at being like a water battery. So when red, infrared, and then later UV light hit your skin, that water charge separates. There's negative charge, positive charge. The negative charge is up against the biological surfaces. So this is the work of Gerald Pollack. Great book for people to look into. It's called The Fourth Phase of Water. That exclusion zone water holds a charge. He's actually been able to put electrodes in there and light up lights with it. So this is probably how the body also works, making energy. ATP by itself probably is not energetically enough to provide energy for your entire system, so you got to have some other sources. It's probably this exclusion zone water. So this is why my talk last week about photobiomodulation was useful. Red light comes in there, it hits the cytochrome C oxidase, it knocks nitric oxide off of it and restores blood flow. But that red and infrared from photobiomodulation panels also is charging up that water battery. The things that do need electrons I'll back it up. This is the whole reason why you want to have periods of time restriction. You don't want energy always going through the system, because if you're putting energy through the system at all hours of the day, you're always going to be making excessive free radicals with that process. It's kind of like having smoke come out of your engine when you're burning gasoline. You want to kind of conserve the body unless you have to use that energy at that point. So that's one of the reasons why nitric oxide kind of acts as a handbrake on cytochrome C oxidase. They say hey, we don't want to make energy right now. This is also the reason why, I talk about diets, aren't individualized to everybody. You have to have a specific diet based off your haplotype, your body composition, your health goals. It depends on, how healthy your mitochondria are, determines what nutrition regimen is probably best for you. Fats are more energetically dense. There's more electrons in them. Carbohydrates actually are at a higher valence energy when they first come in. Carbohydrates come in on the first cytochrome. So usually in the northern latitudes, that's going to be summer. That you would have had foods that were grown with high UV light. Those high UV light carbohydrates go into the first step, and then they jump down the system. But if you're putting those systems into your body in January in the Midwest, and your skin, eyes, and the rest of your body knows that it's winter, your mitochondria weren't expecting this high energy electrons to come into that step. The fats actually skip the first step and come in the second step. So less chance that they leak out. So they only got 4 things to jump down before they get to the end and make the water, the ATP, carbon dioxide, and heat. So this is why some people get a benefit of being on a keto type diet. There's less chances that their body's going to, lose these electrons off the first step to the second step. But the keto diet should be, cyclical. You would have not have been in ketosis permanently by choice. Now there are people, with epilepsy and such need to be in ketosis to really decrease their seizure frequency. But most people, if they're using ketosis, it should be more considered a strategy. You would have seasonally gone into ketosis in the wintertime when you didn't have access to certain foods, and then when the foods grew in the spring, summer, you would have come out of ketosis. So that's how you think about it as a game of electrons. Food is information to the body. Food is energy to the body, but it's mainly that you're going to break that food stuff down into electrons and protons to run it through this mitochondria engine. You can also get electrons that come into that engine by being outside in the sun or using your PPM devices to help charge separate the water that's in your system. And then this is also the benefit of earthing and grounding. So when your hands or feet or your whole body are connected to the earth is negatively charged. There's more electrons in the earth than there are you, so it goes from a high gradient to a low gradient as long as you're connected to the earth. So you get some free electrons from the earth, those electrons go through the mitochondria. This is the reason why you're at the beach, you don't necessarily feel as hungry because you're getting charged up by sunlight, and ideally you're getting a lot of electrons from the beach. You don't have to eat as many food electrons to run them through the mitochondria to make that ATP currency, the water, the heat, and the carbon dioxide. So I know there's a lot of information to begin with, but there's a lot of people that haven't heard me talk about the mitochondria in this depth before. So I always want to kind of lay down the basics for them before we go into deeper topics. So if anybody has any questions about mitochondria, happy to answer them tonight. And did want to give a shout out to Cassidy for making these the other year for one of the holidays. Got some mitochondria cufflinks. Somebody liked them earlier. I said, the next phase of the cufflinks ones, they'll have like maybe a little red LED in it that can light up and look like photomodulations charging up the mitochondria. So maybe that's the next entrepreneurial adventure that I'll get into is custom mitochondria cufflinks. All right, guys. I say Allie on here, welcome. Looking forward to your event in October. So in October, going down to Florida and talking to a bunch of gentlemen about subclinical atherosclerosis, endothelial function, erectile performance. They'll get to hear my stories of being a certified barbecue judge and executive bourbon steward. So. I'll give it a minute or two for any questions. Next week, Monday, 6 p.m. Central Time, same time, same bat channel. Let's do it as a, give it to the audience and you guys choose. So I'll put up a poll in my story after this. If you have a topic that you want me to hit upon that's ideally something cardiovascular related or biohacking or red light or mitochondria, happy to answer it. The one that gets the most votes wins, and we'll do that one next Monday, 6 p.m. Central Time here. So hope you guys have a great week, and if you need me, you know where to find me. Just drop me a direct message, and we'll see you next time.